All right, great. Tracie, we're going to kick it off today on something that we talked a little bit about before, but it has to do with our young women. And the thing that bothers you and I is that young women 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely than other age groups to be attacked for a lot of reasons. But what we want to talk about today is look at an example of how a young girl can be coerced and taken against her will. And we're going to talk about that. You good with that today?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I know that you're really good at is giving young kids and young women the tools to be able to resist. And we've talked before a little bit about there's some difference between self-defense and martial arts training.
Mhm.
And what you and I specialize in is the self-defense side. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is the things that we can do to help our young women. What are some of the things, that principles that you look at?
Yeah, well, because children's self-defense is my specialty, I really tell children it's okay to question authority. A good stranger will not talk to you without permission from your adult. And if you're alone, you're vulnerable. And so a stranger should not be talking to you. They should not be asking you for help. And whatever they tell you to do, you should do the opposite. So it's really giving them the power to question authority and to make a scene if they have to.
One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is the attackers forcing you to comply through the fear of pain, the fear of injury. And what they almost always do is, and I'm trailing a little bit on your do what's opposite
Mhm.
of them, because they almost always will tell you, shut up and you won't get hurt, stay
Right.
quiet or I'll kill you, something along those lines. That
Uh-huh.
is a huge threat. So most people are going to have this Faustian bargain. Okay, okay, just don't hurt me.
Yeah.
And yet we can't count on that. So tell me a little bit about, now I'm being forced through fear. And you're saying do the opposite of what he's telling me.
Right. I always ask the kids, I said, okay, if he says don't run, what do you do? Run. Don't yell. Yell. One of my students was actually taken by a stranger. He came on campus, grabbed her, tried to put her in a baseball bag. He was dressed as a baseball coach. And the first thing he said to her was, if you want to see your mom again, be a good girl. Well, she had remembered what she was taught, be a bad girl. And literally, she was in second grade. She went completely chihuahua on this guy. And that's how she got away because she knew that whatever the bad guy says, you should always do the opposite because they're trying to keep you from yelling or causing attracting attention. So that's really important that we keep talking to our children about if someone says they're going to hurt you, they're not going to hurt you. They're only going to hurt you if they get you away to the second crime scene. And really have that open conversation with them.
Great segue for us to now take a look at this very harrowing video that I have from England. And it shows a incredibly brave woman actually interrupting a abduction in process. Let's take a look at it and then we can talk about it.
I'm following you.
Look, why are you fucking stalking him, bro?
Are you okay? Do you know him?
Wow.
Wow. I know. Wow. And that's how it happens because as you first watch it, it doesn't appear that anything's amiss. She's looks like she's willingly going with this person
Mhm.
who's obviously, when you look at the size differentiation, it's got to be incredibly terrifying for this young
Yeah.
girl. And yet this brave woman goes up and interrupts this abduction and she ends up rescuing this girl. Let's talk about that a little bit, this
Yeah.
scenario.
My first thought was when at the beginning of the video, it almost looks like it's her dad, and he's holding her tight and walking her to school, and then you see the child's body turn. You start to see her stiffen a little bit. You can tell her body language is uncomfortable, and I believe that's when the woman really knew that there was a problem and asked her if she was okay. So, as an upstander, do most of us have that awareness level to actually be able to see things like that, to catch it, to question it? But then the most difficult part, to really step out and do something. She is and was a very brave woman to do that.
And yet, this is exactly the kind of response that we should have from everybody to stop this kind of evil that's in progress. And you used an interesting phrase called an upstander versus
Right.
a bystander. So when you talk about that, what do you mean by that?
Well, we hear the terminology is the bystander effect. That's when everyone's standing around watching because they think that somebody else is going to do something about it. Someone else is calling 911. Somebody else is doing CPR. That's the bystander effect. And then the upstander effect, that's what it is. It's somebody stands up, they step out, they do something. They don't question if somebody else is doing something. Their whole mentality is, I'm going to do something about this. And if there's 10 other people doing it as well, that's great. There's 11 of us calling 911.
Well, and thank you for that, because one of the things that I keep running into is that this is incredibly common. People may be saying, well, that would probably never happen. It's none of my business. Create a stink. Okay, so you're wrong. You can apologize and walk away and be happy with the fact that at least you had the courage to stop something potential happening. And like you said, this was something where this woman had the very real feeling like something's not right here.
Yeah, exactly. And she did something about it. But let's go back to what that little girl should have been taught. I say should have. All children should be taught this. Is first of all, is when I said question authority, we need to teach our children to say, hey, you're a stranger. I don't know you. You're not my dad. And to use our voices, which are our biggest weapons, to attract attention. Even if someone's saying, shh, be quiet, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt your family. Children need to know in advance. They need that they have every right to question that authority and to say something. And honestly, you're not my dad, or I don't know you, is probably going to bring the cavalry. So unfortunately, she didn't know that, but that's something that we as parents can teach our children to do.
I think we have to, because this is something that's not uncommon. Like I said, I'm going to share my screen now, and let's take a look at another interesting similar situation that happened here in the States. So let's take a look at this particular situation because it has to do with a 15-year-old girl who was literally just walked out of an NBA game, and she was actually within hours sold into a sex trafficking ring, and she was being trafficked out of a hotel in Oklahoma City. So what's interesting, what I wanted to really look at this one was that, so what I wanted to do was show you this part, which is right here, which is this is a bigger story, but the surveillance footage shows the girl just being led out of a crowded arena. The Dallas Mavericks are playing a game there. She goes to the bathroom. Her father at a certain point says, why isn't she coming back? And he raises the alarm. And the sad part about this story is no one really helped. No one really helped this family. But what we're trying to get at and be consistent with in this one is that the surveillance footage shows the girl just literally being led out. And that comes back to what you were saying, is we have to give them permission to resist, and then we have to give them the tools to resist. What are some of the things that you teach your kids on the tools to resist?
Well, one of the tools obviously is don't be alone. I don't care if you're 15 or 25 I don't even like going to the bathroom alone in a big stadium, right? So, the buddy system always works. But at that point where she was engaged by the predator, obviously he probably told her, I have a gun, don't scream, don't move. No, I always tell children this. Nobody is going to shoot you or stab you in public. They need you alive. And in fact, I tell the little kid, I'm talking little kids, I say, they're not going to shoot you because they need you alive. How are you going to clean their toilets for 20 years if you're hurt? That's how you talk to a little kid, right? Because we don't want them to know, the ugly truth, right? And kids get that. Oh yeah, they're not going to hurt me. They need me alive, especially if there's people around. Noise attracts attention. Make a scene, go Chihuahua, and really practice those words at home. You're not my dad, or I don't know you. You're not my parent. Anything like that. Practice being loud and teach them what to say. Most children and teens, they'll scream, and screaming a lot of times, especially at a ball game, sounds like you're goofing off or you're playing around. So really teach them that it's not about screaming or screeching. It's about yelling, and it's about saying the right words. I don't know you, help, 911, directing people to actually be that upstander and to step in.
So we've got them trained to resist and start attracting attention.
Yes.
Now there's a physical component that needs to be taught. Give us a simple thing that our young daughters can do to stop from being taken.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest part to teach children, because that's the part that they really want to know what to do. I mentioned this in a prior podcast. Children are only afraid and they only have fear when they don't know what to do. But it's like, every child has that fear of being thrown into the pool until they know how to swim. Then they're not afraid anymore, right? They want to be thrown in the pool. So it's teaching children that if you can't give somebody a really good kick to the shin, strike and run away, then go to the ground, have a self-defense temper tantrum, go Chihuahua crazy, but attract attention. Can you imagine if somebody grabbed your child or your teen or even your wife, and that person went to the ground and started kicking and yelling, I don't know you, you're not my dad, help, 911, stranger? You'd have 50 people jump that guy, but once again, we have to give them permission to do so, and we have to practice it at home. It's all comes down to practice.
Okay, let's take a look at the resistance chart that we've showed before, but I think it adds a lot of substance to what we're talking about in terms of teaching our kids what to do. All right, so we've put this chart up before, and it's done by a great trainer named Greg Ellifritz. And it's something that we have documented, particularly in the Module 1 book on Never Defenseless. But what it shows here is the increasing success rate of the different types of techniques that you are putting into place. So let's start on the far right one. Tracie, take a look and talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, you mentioned it before. If someone's crying and begging and pleading, please don't hurt me, please let me go, I'll do whatever you want. Rape is about power, and pretty much that's what they want. A lot of these predators feed off of fear, just like a dog. So crying and begging might not be the best. I don't even believe it is the best technique to use.
Right. It may actually be worse.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've advocated in the past is that statistics show that if you're even willing to indicate that you are going to resist, that usually half of all attackers break off. So when we look at this chart, 56% of attackers will stop if you start screaming. So what your point is, when we talk screaming versus yelling, so using your voice with a purpose. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no, it's true. Your voice is your biggest weapon. Noise attracts attention. Plus, it keeps you breathing. And then if you have to hit somebody, you really want to be yelling as loud as you can because it gives you more power. So there's a lot of power in the voice. And as we know, predators, you always taught me this. Two things predators are afraid of: getting caught and getting hurt. So, a good back off is definitely, I believe, is a good step into the direction of resisting your attack.
The next one up is running, and that's kind of a simplistic type of thing there, because when we think of running, the first thing comes to mind, I'm turning around, I'm sprinting away from somebody. And that's not necessarily the case. There's some kind of contradictory type of information there, but running is increasing the distance. When I'm going to say that is increasing the distance between us. It may be in a car parking lot where we are literally zigzagging between the cars and putting obstacles in between us. Because if I put an obstacle, I'm creating distance, and distance buys me time, and time buys me options. So when we're saying running away, I would say really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create distance. And that could be going to people, right? Or it could be staying with people. You may find yourself in a parking garage or a multi-level car park for our UK cousins, which it's kind of, you need to go to people. There's no one around necessarily. So go to the middle of the ramp.
Yes.
Stay there. Stay where someone could see you. Necessarily, you're trying to go to people if you're in a private place. In other words, someplace where nobody could hear you scream. Or you want to stay with people if you're somewhere where being taken to a more private place could be deadly for you. So under the running, 85%, and that's essentially moving away from the attacker.
Right.
Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add on just a little bit that whole safe distance. We have to this is what I teach my students: keep a stranger or a car at least 6 arm lengths away. So anytime you're being approached and that person's getting closer to you, that's the time we need to run or get to people. Now, think about the elderly people, though, and I'm going to include myself in that category. There's no way I'm going to be able to run from some young 20-something-year-old predator, right? So you also need to know your physical stamina, right? So for me, it might be better if I can't get to people is to conserve my energy and know how to fight where I'm at if I can't run. And one last thing, the police that I work with, they actually told me that really a safe distance is about 20 feet. And that predator usually will choose not to chase you. Well, 20 feet, that's a long distance, right? They're not in it for a foot race. They're in it to get you to comply. So I don't know about you, but you can't keep 20 feet from yourself and every single stranger that you walk by.
It's so difficult. And we can talk on a separate thing about someone interviewing you and closing the distance. And they're doing it for a reason. They're closing that distance to get close to you so they could see what kind of opportunity they could have. But you brought up a great point, is you want to, which takes us to the next one, which is fight.
Right.
And it's under the heading of resisting, but fighting is employing physical techniques to evade or to stop a physical attack. So now we're up to 86% success rate if you fight, which is deploying physical techniques. We're done talking. Now we're literally trying to strike his weakest targets with our most powerful weapons. Let's talk about that kind of in a general sense.
Yeah, and I look at it twofold. Do you know how to fight? And do you know that you have the right to fight? Little kids always ask me, well, Will I get in trouble if I put my fingers in their eyes? No. I want you to put your fingers in their eyes, right? They actually question defending themselves. They think they're going to get in trouble. So that's a conversation that we need to have with our families. You have the right to defend yourself when you feel that your life is in imminent danger. The minute you say back off, that next step is attempted assault. So once we know we have the right, now we need to know how to fight. And I'm going to throw that one back to you.
Well, and that is probably the thing that separates us from a lot of other programs is that that's really how this whole program started, was finding that very narrow area that was being ignored by a lot of programs. There's a lot of programs that tell you how to avoid things and carry your purse close to your body. Don't go to the ATM at 2 a.m. All of those common sense self-defense things that people talk about. Or it's on the other end, which is here's what to do after you've been sexually assaulted. And before you see the sane nurse and those kind of things, preserving evidence and all that kind of, there's a lot of information on this side and that side. But in the middle, we had women coming to us saying, what exactly do I do if he's pinning me to the ground and, assaulting me from that standpoint? What exactly can we do? And that's how it's all started. When I started this program, it was really kind of like, I don't know the answer. We have to look, and what can women do? And that's how this program all ended up coming to the forefront. And we run into the situation where women find out that, oh, I can do these techniques. These aren't necessarily martial arts techniques. They are self-defense techniques, and they've been developed by women for women. So not from commandos, not from elite police departments. These are techniques that women have learned. And that's why it translates so well to children from our standpoint too. And I know that you use a lot of the gross body motion things too to resist.
Yeah, and we need to explain that to people. I've found when I'm teaching children, teens, and women, the difference between fine motor skills and large motor skills. And I usually do a demonstration in the beginning of the class where, if someone's teaching you, the guy grabs your wrists and you go, wow, you're toast. Before you know it, girlfriend, you're in a chokehold because he's just pulled you, turned you around, and put you in a chokehold. So think large, gross motor skills. Everybody knows how to have a temper tantrum. Everybody. Now you just need to know the targets.
Now, one of the things that we're not going to cover so much right now, but we will do in a later podcast or something, is the final one that you see on the left. And that is essentially resisting with a weapon. And so we say that it says gun or knife, but it can be an impact weapon. It can be an edged weapon. It can be a projectile weapon. Resisting, you have to learn how to resist appropriately, because I know a lot of students that I run into say, whoa, I would never want to use a firearm because I've heard for so long that it can be used against me. And so I don't want to use it. Or I'm afraid that he's going to take it from me and then I'll really make him mad and really hurt me. Oh, he's going to really hurt you anyway. So I think that's why, in the sense that last part of the chart, 99% rate of there's an old saying, it's hard to rape a 38. And
I love it.
So it's actually, you're in territory now from that whole continuum of force. You are in potentially deadly situation. You may, if you're taken to a secondary crime scene, and if you are taken somewhere more private, the odds are statistically you're not coming back alive.
Yes.
So we get to that last part and we can cover that on something else, because really what we want to do on this one is focus on those first three ones, which is I love how you say you got to have permission. And then it is doing exactly opposite of what they tell you. And
Mhm.
then we're going to say run or get distance.
Yep.
And then also we have to be prepared to physically resist.
Right. And know what to do. And that simply means if you're not into the martial arts, take a self-defense class. I think self-defense actually is a life skill that should be taught, in physical education. That's something that I'm trying to work on right now. But you and I both know the average predator knows they have less than 3 seconds to gain control over you. So let's teach our families how to react in less than 3 seconds.
I thank you for bringing that up because there's a lot of old information that seems to survive. And one of the things way back in the old days was, wow, you can't let this go on for long because the longer it goes on, the better for him and the worse for you. It's exactly the opposite. The more you can drag this out, the better chance he could be noticed and caught. And also at a certain point, he's going to give up in terms of, I need to get away from here. And we've talked about in the interview process where you'll get the emotional blackmail of like, God, what's your problem? I didn't do anything. Why are you being such a bitch? And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of thing we're going to face. But it also tells you totally snuffed an attempt to try to get close to you and somehow assault you or some other kind of crime, robbery or something like that. Tell
Well
me a
said.
little bit. You're in San Diego.
Correct.
So you're in San Diego. Tell me a little bit about kind of the general feeling of kind of the level of crime that we're seeing in the US now.
Wow, I'm so glad you brought that up. Do you know, I feel that San Diego is safer than a lot of, well, San Francisco and Los Angeles right now. But we just had a 63-year-old woman last week was scalped with a sword. Some crazy guy on the street had a sword and he took off part of her scalp. And just random crazy crimes are happening now. And I see the fear level in people right now. Because I get every day, I'm getting phone calls and emails asking, when's your next class? When's your next class? It's not, I can 100% guarantee you this is not something that people are overreacting. They're seeing it in the news, they're hearing it. It's obvious that crime is on the rise, and we don't have the law enforcement or the manpower, to patrol the streets. And so people really need to learn prevention, safety, and how to fight if they have to.
One of the things that is kind of two sides of the same coin that I'm running into is on the YouTube channel. I've posted a horrible situation in the New York subway where a attacker grabs a woman who's just a passenger by the hair, and he's essentially threatening her and pulling her hair and forcing her to get up and move. And the car is full of grown men who absolutely ignore the situation.
Mhm.
There's one person filming it, and you can see there's other women or other people on the car, and the women, of course, are terrified, and the men are literally turning their backs and continuing to talk. Now, the other side of that coin is I've got a video, I think it might be from Australia, of an argument between a man and a woman that breaks out on a subway car. And I think he starts threatening the woman. Oh, the men on that car, they jump up and say, stop, and they intervene. And so you still have there's parts in the world and parts in the US where people will intervene.
Mm.
In New York, you saw Daniel Penny get involved and intervening with a situation that the other car writers are saying is totally justified, and he's being absolutely pilloried.
I think the backlash that we're going to see from the Daniel Penny case is that people are not going to want to get involved for two reasons: legally, and they don't want to get hurt. Now, I'm assuming, and I don't know the facts, that maybe the woman whose hair was being grabbed, people assumed that that was domestic violence situation and they didn't want to get involved. And I hear that a lot. I hear people tell me, well, it's probably some husband and wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, or partners getting into it. It's domestic. I'm not going to get involved. So we need to really train our students and get the word out that if some guy's grabbing my hair and I don't know this person, I need to ask somebody, call 911, help. I don't know this person, so that they don't think it's a domestic situation and maybe might be more inclined to get involved. But, finally, there's power in numbers. Why can't I just recruit a bunch of people to help me take that guy down? Or actually someone like you take that guy down.
So I think it really is going to be incumbent on all of us to teach our kids what they need to do to survive in this kind of temporary chaotic situation that we're facing.
Right. And I hate to say this because it's so cliche, but we really need to teach our children and encourage our families and loved ones to be aware, that situational awareness you talk about in your book, to be aware of things that don't feel right, they don't look right. Stop looking at our phones, look around, notice what's going on around you. And then because, around 90% of the time we're going to know our attacker, is to really be in touch with the way that that person is making us feel. Be aware of our intuition or our gut feeling.
Well, thank you, Tracie. What a great finish for this really strange period of time that we're going through. And our responsibility is to protect our young women and our daughters in our society. Because what's interesting is we're seeing this attack on women, and yet from a biological standpoint, women and children are so important to our future that men will literally die for women. A number of years ago at the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting, I think you and I have talked about this before. Men, after the scene of the shooting, they were finding that men had sacrificed themselves and had shielded women with their bodies. And that's the whole women and children to the lifeboats first type of thing. We understand, to let our civilization continue, the future is women and children. We have to empower our kids to be able to survive this chaotic condition that we have right now.
Yeah, ABCs of self-defense: awareness, teach them to set boundaries, and give them the confidence to do so.
Terrific. Thank you again, Tracie. And then we'll have a lot of these notes down here in the show notes below, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, looking forward to it.